Hello and welcome to the Very Cold Lasagna podcast, your place for all your filthy casual takes on the world of sports. I am your host, Dylan Lasagna, and this is episode number 275. In this episode, we're here to continue along our 2025 NFL season team preview month. And so far, we're about more than a quarter away through our team-by-team previews. And so far, we've already covered 12 teams. That means 3 divisions that we covered. And those 3 divisions were the NFC West, the AFC West, and the AFC North. And in our part 4, which is this episode, we're going to be going back to the NFC side of things to talk about the NFC North and the 4 teams residing in that division. So after this episode, make sure, if you haven't already, make sure to listen to the previous 3 episodes of me discussing and previewing the 3 divisions that we already talked about, which, like I said, was the NFC West, the AFC West, and the AFC North. So strap in and make sure to lock in as we now cover the NFC North side of things with our team-by-team previews. So whether you're listening to this on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, thank you for supporting this podcast for all the filthy casuals out there. It's entitled Very Cold Lasagna. So now let's get into the stick of things with our NFC North 2025 preview. And first look at a team that had all the high hopes, especially for their fan base, only for it to completely crash down after the quarter point of the season, as in usual fashion for the last, I'd say, couple of years. And I'm talking about the Chicago Bears. Oh, good old-fashioned Bears football. So the Bears last year, they reined in a new quarterback once again, a brand new quarterback by the name of Caleb Williams. So after failing with Mitch Trubisky, failing with Justin Fields, they bring in USC quarterback Caleb Williams in his rookie year. And they actually got off to a pretty solid start at 4-2. So they were 4-2 at the quarter-way point of the season. But yeah, that game against the Washington Commanders, and that ending to that game against the Commanders. Y'all remember the Hail Maryland game? That Hail Maryland ending? Yeah. After that, it all came crashing down. Everything crumbled for the Bears after that. They lost 10 straight games after that, most of them in heartbreaking fashion. And yeah, that was pretty much it for the Bears' playoff hopes. But they at least ended their season, their 2024 campaign, on a little bit of a positive note. They snapped their losing streak in an upset over the Green Bay Packers that, well, not only got themselves a win in terms of the Bears, but it also sent their division rivals down to the 7th seed in their playoff quest. And yeah, they got whooped by Philadelphia in the playoffs. So yeah, not exactly the best ending for the Bears in 2024. Ended the season 5-12, but they at least ended their season with a win and a little bit of some flashes from Caleb. And well, they certainly could have used more improvement from him, but at least they can head into an offseason finally addressing their needs to hopefully get their long-term quarterback, finally developing. So some of those needs included retooling that offensive line in a major way, because it's been a big problem for the Bears, whether it was Mitch Trubisky, Justin Fields, and now Caleb Williams. So yeah, pretty much like Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky, Caleb Williams went to Sack City in his rookie year. Well, a lot of it had to do with him always trying to make something happen, scrambling out of the pocket and just holding on to that ball for too long. And his read times were too long. It didn't help that his offensive line had major issues, especially in the interior. And yeah, that needed to be fixed. So retooling that offensive line was a major need for the Bears in the offseason. And speaking of the trenches, they had to retool that defensive line because the Bears struggled in this area because Montez Sweat wasn't getting a lot of help in both the run defense and pressuring the quarterback. So Ryan Poles really needs to fix that in free agency. And who knows, maybe if there's something there with that 10th overall pick, get something there. Get an edge rusher, get an interior defensive lineman to pair with Montez Sweat. And then Get some more help around Caleb Williams. Get a receiver. Get a running back. He already had DJ Moore and Romeo Odunze already, sure. He had that 1-2 punch combo. But why stop there? They kind of still needed a tight end. So why should Ryan Poles stop? So looking at some of the things that happened around the Bears within the offseason, this at least the last couple of months, obviously they fired Matt Eberflus. Like most Bears fans know this, especially after that horrific ending to that Thanksgiving game last year in Detroit. The writing was on the wall for the Bears to fire Matt Eberflus, especially in the midst of that losing streak after the game in Washington. And interim head coach Thomas Brown, he didn't stay around. The Bears didn't keep him. So both of them were replaced with former Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson as their new head coach, which was a really good choice. Probably one of the smarter decisions that the Bears have made for the first time in a pretty long time. So good for them. Ben Johnson should really help develop Caleb Williams. And the moves didn't stop there because the Bears really attacked one of their pressing needs, and that was the offensive line. And that all started with the trade for guard Jonah Jackson from the Rams, and it only cost them a 6th-round pick for this year, so not really a whole lot. And that didn't stop there either. They went out and traded for guard Joe Thuney from the Chiefs in return for next year's 4th-round pick. Again, not really all that much. So the Bears addressed at least part of their interior offensive line with 2 guards right out of the bat, just not before free agency. So speaking of free agency, they didn't really lose a whole lot in free agency, not really a whole lot of notable names, but they did gain a couple of notable names, like center Drew Dalman from the Falcons. So that pretty much completes the set, the trio of that interior offensive line. The Bears did exactly what they needed to do and address that offensive line that desperately needs some help. And then going on to the other side of the trenches, they added defensive tackle Grady Jarrett, who was released by Atlanta, to pair with Montez Sweat. They also got an edge rusher by the name of Dayo Odeyingbo. Sorry for mispronouncing that, people, from the Indianapolis Colts. So, that's a couple of defensive players that the Bears added to hopefully address that run defense and hopefully address the pass rushing issues that they've been having. And then looking at the draft, some of the key names that were added to this Bears team, they used that 10th overall pick to go and get Colston Loveland from Michigan. So hopefully he's a pretty good pick for them, and hopefully adds to that Bears passing attack for Caleb Williams. But the passing attack didn't stop there because they got a receiver by the name of Luther Burden III from Missouri. They also got another offensive lineman to add some depth to that revamped group, Ozzie Trapilo from Boston College, and then more depth to that revamped defensive line, Shamar Turner from Texas A&M. So I liked what the Bears did this offseason. Surprisingly, for once, they aggressively attacked it. And, credit to them because they have a franchise quarterback on their hands. At least hopefully that's the thing. And he needed a lot of help. Ryan Poles and new head coach Ben Johnson surrounded Caleb Williams with a lot of help up front, especially to assure he's going to succeed. Hopefully. Now it's on Caleb Williams to take advantage of that. Can he use pretty much all the resources that Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson are giving him to form into what's hopefully, at least in the minimum, a long-term quarterback that the Bears have been long seeking? The defense on the other side, which was, I'd say there were still some flashes and there were some positives. They should be better too. Poles also did a good job in adding help for Montez Sweat with the additions of Grady Jarrett, and that pass rush should be, I say, much better now. Drafting Shamar Turner should work too. The secondary, there are, I'd say, a few questions, but I say this Bears team should at least look better as long as they don't collapse again by some Hail Mary once again, and then go on this long losing streak. So for the Bears, going into this season, they have a couple of key games to keep in mind. 2 division games to start off the year. Like a week 1 Monday night game to close out the first week of the season. Week 1, they take on Minnesota and their starting quarterback, J.J. McCarthy. And then they have to go to Detroit on a short week to take on the Lions and, Ben Johnson's old team. Then they head back home to take on the Dallas Cowboys. And then a couple weeks later, a rematch against the same team that's, started it all for the downfall of last season. Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. Yeah, will Caleb Williams be able to avenge that game from last year against that team? I'll be in tune for that one. So obviously the end goal for this Bears season is obviously making the playoffs. Sure, some Bears fans will want to say, "Oh, we want to win, do more than that, win the division." But in a division like this, the NFC North, it's going to be uber competitive. So for the Bears and their fan base, the maximum that you want to have for your expectations is just making the playoffs, at least for right now. So for the Bears, my thing is, how's Caleb Williams going to do this year in year 2? He flashed strong potential in this rookie year, but he still had his flaws, like trying to do too many improv plays that weren't there, not recognizing any pressure. Some of the things I've already mentioned at the beginning of their preview. So even with an improved supporting cast and now a better head coach who should have better play calls for him, he's going to have to prove he can go trend upwards this year. And will these defensive additions live up to expectations? I mean, hopefully they will, especially on the defensive front. You got a duo of Montez Sweat and Grady Jarrett now. And you made a few more notable additions as well. So hopefully with all of that in mind, this defense should be better at the very least. So for the Bears, they surprisingly did non-Bears things this offseason and actually revamped almost the entire team, especially on offense, to help hopefully their long-term quarterback and Caleb Williams. Most importantly, getting an offensive-minded head coach. But as always, these on-paper moves, they got to translate to actual on-field execution. Let's see what happens in the preseason, and let's see how the regular season goes for the Bears. So, it all has to come together, full circle for the Chicago Bears. And let's see whether or not this Bears team is going to be for real, or is it just going to be, once again, typical old Bears football, pal. So moving on from the good old soldier field of Chicago that, once again looks like someone took a large ass dump on the Roman Coliseum, to the place that was home to the NFL draft recently, Title Town as they like to call it. Let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. So the Packers, the still young stud Packers squad, entering 2024 last year with high expectations. The prior season in 2023, they had a surprising one, shocking the world. Unseating not unseating themselves, but going in as a 7th seed and destroying the Cowboys, and then almost upsetting my San Francisco 49ers in that 2023 playoffs. And this upcoming season, obviously, they had higher expectations. And while they almost managed to mostly live up to them, they collapsed in their final 2 regular season games. And they fell down to the 7th seed. And in their wildcard game to the eventual Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles, they did not look great in that game. And that was mainly because of injuries and a lack of discipline and kind of the problems that plagued them in their last playoff game against the 49ers. Jordan Love, his issues coming back to bite him with the turnovers. So for the Green Bay Packers, this upcoming season, you want to do better than that. The goal for them, obviously, is to dethrone the Lions or whoever is standing in their way but mainly the Lions. You want to dethrone them and win this division because this team's still relatively young, but yeah, they still make a lot of mistakes. So looking at some of the needs this past offseason for the Packers, they had to replenish their cornerback depth because outside Keyshawn Nixon, that depth has been very weak the last 2 seasons. And Jair Alexander hasn't been able to stay healthy. And they had to make a decision on him too. And they had to invest in a top receiver as well because they've been able to get away with it in their 2023 campaign. But last year, not having a top receiver and just having this rotating cast of secondary ones, it finally caught up to them with Jordan Love in the final couple weeks last season, especially in that wild card loss to Philadelphia. And it especially caught up to them when Christian Watson tore his ACL in week 18. And he's likely going to be out for whoever knows how long this upcoming season. So the Pack needed to nab a top receiver or two in either free agency or the draft. So they also had to consider adding new pieces to the defensive line because 2 of their starters in Devontae Wyatt and Lucas Van Ness, in my opinion, they kind of disappointed. Just at least in my eyes, maybe some of y'all can bring some perspective, some different opinions. But yeah, they haven't done exactly good. So perhaps Green Bay could add some competition in camp to challenge those guys. So it was relatively pretty quiet as it had been in Green Bay the last couple of off seasons, other than getting a certain running back. But yeah, it was relatively quiet this offseason in Green Bay, other than the draft obviously being there. But they did re-sign a few key players like Isaiah McDuffie, Brandon McManus, and receiver Bo Melton. So other than that, not really a whole lot. The free agency market for them, they lost, I wouldn't say anyone notable. They did lose Corey Ballantyne and Eric Stokes, but they were replaceable anyway. A.J. Dillon was a backup to Josh Jacobs. Offensive lineman Andre Dillard and Josh Myers were replaceable. They added a few notable people like Nate Hobbs from the Raiders, guard Aaron Banks from my Niners, but I'm not sure why they did that because they massively overpaid a guy that had injury history and he underperformed. So I'm not sure why they did that, but maybe he'll do better on his new team. They added a reserve receiver in McCole Hardman from the Chiefs, and they added a few linebackers and Christian Welch and Isaiah Simmons. So the draft is where they did their dirty work. It being in their home state and their host city. So the biggest move that they made obviously has to be in the first round, where they finally after all these years, they drafted an offensive player. They finally drafted offense in the first round, and they got themselves a receiver in Matthew Golden from Texas. They finally got themselves a first round offensive player. It's about time. It's about time the Packers got themselves somebody on offense in the first round because they've always did defense in the last several years, and they finally got themselves one. The rest of the draft picks for the Packers included edge rusher Baron Sorrell, offensive lineman Anthony Belton. They got themselves another receiver in Savion Williams, and the other ones included linebacker Colin Oliver and defensive tackle Warren Brinson. So, yeah, the Packers got their top receiver and I'd say a whole lot more. And yeah, I'd say they wisened up and picked offense in the first round and much later in the draft. And it's not just the quantity though. They got 3 receivers in this draft. It's the quality because Golden, from the few clips that I've seen, is a speedy downfield threat, and Savion Williams is a big, beefy red zone target. So essentially, Jordan Love got his 1A and possibly his new 1B if Williams is able to surpass Christian Watson once he gets back on the field. So I like this. I like these picks that the Packers have made. And if they continue to establish themselves in training camp and preseason, yeah, it might just be that new combo that Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur are desperately needing. They also got the potential replacement for Jair Alexander. Again, Jair was released by the Packers about a month or two ago. So, yeah, they really needed another corner because they couldn't rely on Jair Alexander anymore with his health issues. So, Nate Hobbs, who did really good work as a man-to-man corner in the last 2 seasons with the Raiders, but he really had no help. So, he'll get such with Keyshawn Nixon on the opposite side of him, as well as Xavier McKinney at safety. So, yeah, this trio should do some good work and help. And Nate Hobbs should help that Packers defense now. So looking at some of the key games this season for the Packers, you look towards the first 2 games at home, facing Detroit and facing Washington. Yeah, there's going to be some big games for the Packers in their home stretch to begin the season. And then you point towards week 4, heading to Dallas to face the Cowboys. And then you point towards much later in the season, taking on Philadelphia and a rematch of that wildcard game, this time with the Packers as the home team. And then you point towards that Thanksgiving rematch, a division rematch right away, that's taking place on Thanksgiving. You have to head to Detroit to take on the Lions. So that should be an interesting matchup and a fun one at that. So, yeah, some of the concerns and questions surrounding this Packers team has to do with Matthew Golden. Again, great downfield threat in college, but the stats and regarding his production and sometimes on the field too, it might sometimes say otherwise, but we'll see. Sometimes the stats in on-field production in college sometimes will mislead you. Again, as I've always said in my team previews and my team recaps, production in college, whether or not, will either sometimes translate or always translate well or not in the NFL. So either way, he'll need to establish that connection with Jordan Love quick, especially given that, yeah, there are not a lot of bodies right now in that Packers receiving core. And speaking of Jordan Love, is he able to reduce that turnover habit, or let alone dissolve it? Like, at least for the most part, because yeah, Jordan Love, he had that terrible habit of having at least 1 interception per game for, I'd say, more than half of the season. 11 games where he threw at least 1 interception. Even when the Pack were winning games, his turnover issues were well prevalent. And it reared its ugly head again in that playoff loss to Philadelphia. So if the Packers want to beat the best of the best this year and at least have a winning record versus the NFC North, because they did not do well against the division, by the way. I believe they won at least 1 game, and that was against the Bears. Then, yeah, Love has to reduce the turnovers and do better in clutch time. He doesn't have many excuses now to do above average. Now that he has potentially two top receivers, as well as Watson once he returns. So, yeah, not a lot of excuses for Jordan Love now. So some will argue that it was another quiet offseason for the Packers other than hosting the draft. But I can argue that the Packers, while yeah, it was a quiet offseason, they at least made the necessary moves to help themselves keep pace with the Lions and possibly the Bears in a competitive division. And the NFC North, I'd say for the next next year or two, it's going to be a competitive division. So Green Bay remains one of the youngest teams in the NFL, if not they're still the youngest team. But this year, we'll also need to see results that go beyond a wildcard berth. Can they win the division? Can they unseat the Lions for the NFC North Division title? Well, Matt LaFleur has to hope these offseason additions can help reach that goal. Can Jordan Love take that next step to achieve the division title? One can hope. One has to wait and see if the Packers can reattain that division crown back into Title Town. So moving on from the Pack, we go to the skull, and talk about the Minnesota Vikings. Last year, this Vikings squad was supposed to be rebuilding. Yeah, this Vikings team was supposed to be rebuilding, but they ended up doing better than expected thanks to Sam Darnold's career year. Yeah, Sam Darnold. He was actually supposed to be the backup to J.J. McCarthy, the rookie from Michigan, but J.J. McCarthy ended up having a season-ending knee injury, and Sam Darnold had to start the whole year. But yeah, despite Sam Darnold's career best year, they collapsed when it mattered most in the season finale for the NFC North and the NFC's top seed against the Detroit Lions. So that sent the Vikings down to the 5th seed, and they got their asses handed to the LA Rams in their lone playoff game. That wasn't even in LA. It was in Arizona. Understandably so, because of the wildfires that were going on at the time. So the Vikings had to make a lot of key decisions. They had to make a lot of changes in the offseason because, yeah, while they managed to have a nice season at 14-3, they didn't exactly do anything notable in the playoffs. So some of those needs included, well, what are you going to do at the quarterback position? They went into this recent offseason with a big decision to make at the QB spot. Do you pay Sam Darnold a big fat contract despite him only having his best year this past year and 2024, but him falling apart in a winner-take-all game in Week 18 and falling apart in their lone playoff game in Arizona against the LA Rams? Or do you gamble with rookie quarterback J.J. McCarthy despite him missing all of last year with that torn meniscus? So a lot of decisions had to be made at the game's most important position. Other things that they had to address was retooling the defense, because more than half of that Vikings defense was a major weakness last year. And the Vikings really need to address that, specifically the defensive line and the cornerback spots, if they want to compete again with the rest of the division. Because, yeah, those quarterbacks in that division were really torching their butts. And they had to add better depth to the offensive line in case any of their starters got hurt again, like Christian Darrisaw did. Because, yeah, Christian Darrisaw was really the glue to that offensive line. And once he got hurt, it was not good for the Vikings. It eventually crumbled. So looking at some of the things that happened this offseason for the Vikings in terms of notable events, they did re-sign a couple of key players like Aaron Jones at running back, corner Byron Murphy, and their safeties Harrison Smith and Theo Jackson. But they did release setter Garrett Bradbury. I mean, whether he was good or not, you never want to release some of your key offensive linemen. So they also did make a big decision. They let Sam Darnold leave in free agency to go to the Seahawks. So that pretty much meant the era of J.J. McCarthy was officially underway. But they continued the moves with letting offensive linemen go. They traded away Ed Ingram to the Texans. They did make a move for a running back, though. They traded for running back Jordan Mason from my 49ers and this year's 6th-round pick in return for this year's 5th-round pick and next year's 6th-round pick. So, yeah, they desperately needed a running back that could make some moves because Aaron Jones struggled. And, yeah, they wanted to get one in Jordan Mason, who, proved his worth, when he had to play in place of Christian McCaffrey at times. So, looking at some of the other offseason moves for the Vikings, they lost a couple of notable people like Cam Bynum at safety, left tackle Cam Robinson, edge rusher Jerry Tillery. Other than that, not really other notable people that they lost. They did add a couple of notable people, though, like defensive tackles Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave when they got released by their respective teams. Offensive linemen, because they really had to retool that bunch, Ryan Kelly and Will Fries from the Colts. So that interior was revamped. They also got corner Isaiah Rodgers from the Eagles, and they also got another receiver to help out Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, Rondale Moore from the Falcons. And the draft, they really couldn't do much. So they only got 3 picks. So they got guard Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. They got another receiver to add to that depth, Ty Filton from Maryland, and they continue to address the trenches. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins from Georgia. So when I look at this Vikings team going to 2025, you got to look at the trenches. They should be better when in contrast to last year. So they at least prioritized the problem area from last year. They retooled the offensive line in adding proven starters, Ryan Kelly and right guard Will Fries from the Colts. And the only thing is their health issues from last year. And rookie Donovan Jackson should be able to surpass Blake Brandell at left guard. Meanwhile, you have at the defensive line, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave should be big help for Andrew Van Ginkel and Harrison Phillips in their front four. So that should be good for them. So looking at the Vikings and their ultimate goal for 2025, I don't know. It's you can't certainly say the NFC North is a lock for them, or at least attainable for them, because we got to wonder how J.J. McCarthy, who missed out his rookie year, is going to pan out, because this is essentially his rookie year. So the goal for the Minnesota Vikings this year is, you got to hope J.J. McCarthy, he pans out and he works out this year. That's pretty much you got to hope for this upcoming year. Hope that J.J. McCarthy is your starting quarterback long term, at least this year. So looking at some of the key games for the Minnesota Vikings this year, for a team that's trotting out a new quarterback, it's always going to be the first 3 games. You look at the Monday night game to close out week 1. You have to face Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears, and that very revamped group. Then you come back home for a 2-game stretch to take on the Atlanta Falcons and then the Cincinnati Bengals. A very, I'd say it's a very mixed bag when it comes to scheduling for the Vikings. So going back to JJ McCarthy, how is he going to fare after a 1-year layoff? It seems like he's doing okay. He seems like he's doing fine in his offseason preparation, but we'll see how it pans out when it comes to game time action. And when it came to game time action during his lone preseason game against the Raiders last year, he had 2 touchdowns. But obviously when it comes to actual game time action, sure, like I said, he's doing fine in OTAs. He's doing fine in mini camps. We'll see how he does in training camp. But there's certainly going to be rust after missing last season. The positive is he would have had at least a full offseason to prepare for this upcoming year. Now, on the other side, the defense, can they stay healthy and can they perform well? The Vikings, aside from Byron Murphy, elected to inject youth in their secondary, and smartly so. But of course, they'll have to bank on them to do well. So for the Minnesota Vikings, last year was an unexpected season that saw them win 14 games, but they obviously got crushed in their lone playoff game. So this upcoming year, Minnesota probably may have the season that they were supposed to have last year. And I'd say it's probably a kind of, I don't necessarily want to say rebuild-ish year, but kind of a sorting things out year as they fully usher in J.J. McCarthy. They'll be banging hard, too, that McCarthy does well in his first actual season as a starter, especially given that he missed all of last year. So it's going to be an interesting season for the Minnesota Vikings, because if McCarthy pans out, that's great news for them. But if he flames out, that's going to be, bad for them. So we move on from the skull, from the Minnesota Vikings, and move on to Motown, our final team of our NFC North preview, to take on and look at the Detroit Lions. So the winners of the last 2 NFC North championships, and the best team, or at least supposedly was supposed to be the best team in the NFL last year, the Detroit Lions, led by Jared Goff and a high-octane offense. The Lions probably had their best lone shot at winning the NFC and the Super Bowl last season, because they were 15-2 with that high-octane offense. But unfortunately, countless injuries on defense and a very poor showing in their lone playoff game. Yes, I said lone playoff game in the divisional round against the Commanders led to an early exit and ended those hopes at their one good shot to win the NFC and the Super Bowl. So, very disappointing ending for the Lions last season. And yeah, there was a lot of turnover this past offseason, but I'll get into that in a bit. So, despite what I just said, the goal for Detroit is to make it back to the NFC Championship somehow, some way, and win it. So as we speak right now, they're still one of the two favorites, aside from Philadelphia, to be in the Super Bowl. But that remains to be seen. Can they do that? Well, let's talk about it. So looking at some of the things that happened for the Lions this past offseason, well, as I talked about just a second ago, and their goal of making it back to the NFC Championship is going to be an uphill climb because they just lost, that was just like, feels like an eternity ago. They lost both of their coordinators, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, to head coaching jobs. And they replaced them internally with John Moran and Kelvin Shepard. So our offensive coordinator, John Moran, he had previous experience over at USC. That was over a decade ago. But on the other side, with Kelvin Shepard, this is going to be his first time at defensive coordinator. So now with Kelvin Shepard, though, in fairness, he at least had some experience, under Aaron Glenn. But yeah, at defensive coordinator, it's going to be interesting how that pans out. So they re-signed offensive lineman Dan Skipper and edge rusher Marcus Davenport to 1-year deals. They also re-signed linebacker Derek Barnes to a 3-year deal. But yeah, the most interesting aspect, the most notable aspect was having to replace Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn because, yeah, the creativity and the aggressiveness of that Lions team came from both of those coordinators. So looking at some of their off-season needs aside from those coordinators was adding a lot of help to that defense, especially at cornerback, because the Lions passing attack, it died with all the constant injuries on defense. So they need a lot of help at that position at cornerback. They also needed to add depth to the defensive line. Alan McNeil and especially Aiden Hutchinson were entering this upcoming season off of major injuries. Now, it seems like Aiden Hutchinson, he may be ready to play against the Packers in the opener. But that remains to be seen. Hopefully his road to recovery is going swimmingly. So either way, finding help was essential if neither of them were able to recapture their pre-injury play. But as it stands right now, at least Aiden Hutchinson seems like he's gonna be able to, at least be a little bit able to recapture that. But we'll see. So looking at some of their key offseason moves, it was kind of quiet for the Lions, even though they had some money to spend. They lost Carlton Davis and Kendall Vindor, but they weren't really helpful to that Lions defense. And they lost guard Kevin Zeitler, a key piece to that offensive line. They didn't really. They actually did add a couple of notable names like DJ Reed, Avante Maddox. So they mainly added some cornerback group helps to, try to bolster that secondary. DJ Reed, Rocky Sin, and Avante Maddox. So, but the most notable name of the bunch was DJ Reed. The draft is where they did their dirty work, though. They got defensive tackle Tyleek Williams from Ohio State to try and bolster that front four. They continued to add to the offensive line Tate Rattledge from Georgia, receiver Isaac Tessala from Arkansas, guard Miles Frazier from LSU, and edge rusher Ahmed Hassanin Nasalin from Boise State. Sorry for mispronouncing that, by the way. So, when it comes to the Lions this upcoming season, I think their cornerback depth should be better, at least on paper, because again, DJ Reed is the biggest addition to the Lions from this past offseason. And it should be a big help to second-year player Terrion Arnold and Brian Branch. And also, don't discount Avonte Maddox and Rock Ya-Sin, who should be solid players that previously started on their initial teams. And they can be key depth pieces, just as long as everyone can stay healthy. And hopefully Terrion Arnold takes that next step, because in his rookie year, he was a very big target for quarterbacks to pick on him when it comes to getting free penalty yards on him. So hopefully going into this season, Terrion Arnold, he learns from that. He becomes a better player. So maybe DJ Reed can help him on that. So yeah, when it comes to going back to the new coordinators though, I saw like a lot of tweets on the timeline that the Lions offense was struggling to adapt to John Moran, while the defense was adapting a little bit faster to Kelvin Shepard. So to that, I say, give the coordinators some more time, give them some more leeway, because they're still like a month or two for the season to go, including training camp and preseason games. So there's still plenty of time for both sides to adjust, especially, on the offensive side. They lost that. They probably lost that creativity that Ben Johnson had, and now they got to adjust to, being a standard offense. But who knows if they did actually lose that creativity that Ben Johnson had? Like Jared Goff has to go back to being good old Jared Goff. So looking at some of the key games for the Lions this upcoming season, you have to start on the road to play the Green Bay Packers. But yeah, that's a key division game. But you have to play another key division game the following week when you have your home opener against the Chicago Bears and that revamped Bear squad under Caleb Williams. But then you have to go back on the road to take on Baltimore and Lamar Jackson. And then a couple weeks later, you go back to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. And then you look at a interesting stretch, a very rough stretch in the NFC East. You go to Washington to take on the Commanders. And then you go to Philadelphia to take on the defending Super Bowl champions, Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. Those are two tough teams, especially when you have a team like the Lions that has two new coordinators. Sure, it'll be the midseason stretch. They'll probably be adapted by then, but you have a Lions team that's going to look much different under two new coordinators. And they're facing a team with two young quarterbacks in Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts. Both teams are going to be killing each other in that NFC East and vying for that division title. So, and those are must-win games for both of those teams. So that's going to be interesting to watch in those 2 weeks. But that's also two must-win games for the Lions. So for the Lions entering the season, it's mostly about Jared Goff, aside from the coordinators. Is he going to be able to have another strong season? Because obviously Goff still has an elite offense that has Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, that power punch running back duo of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, and one of the NFL's best offensive linemen. He himself has played at an MVP level in the last 2 years, in my opinion, but he didn't in that lone playoff game last year against Washington. And he'll have to adjust to a new coordinator that may or may not be as good as Ben Johnson was. So who knows what kind of Jared Goff we're going to get this upcoming year. And the defense. Can that defense stay healthy? And can they perform better than they were the last 2 years? Because the defense last year was dog dookie water. So at least the GM and the head coach duo, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, they went out of their way and addressed it by adding depth all around. But that depth can only go so far. Additions on paper can only go so far. It's still important for those additions, as well as those current mainstays, to perform well and not get cursed by the injury bug. Especially given that Alan McNeil and Aiden Hutchinson, like I said, they're coming off major injuries. And at least Aiden Hutchinson is at least somewhat preparing himself to play in that season opener. So it looks like he's making some progress to play in the season opener, at least from what I saw last time, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that. So the Lions, they had their best shot at winning the Super Bowl last season, but unfortunately, it came crashing down on them last season. But as I mentioned back in March, that season, that window, despite what I said in the very beginning of this preview for the Lions, even if it was just one best shot, it still remains open. That window still remains open to finally get to the promised land, finally hoisting a Lombardi trophy in the Motor City. The thing is, they just need everybody to stay healthy at any and all costs, and they need to adapt to this kind of interesting new dynamic of their new coordinators. Everything just has to come full circle for them in 2025 if they want the Lombardi trophy to come to them, to the Motor City. So that is a wrap on this episode number 275 of Very Cold Lasagna, and a wrap on our NFC North team preview edition of our 2025 NFL season team previews, where we covered the Chicago Bears, the Green Bay Packers, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Detroit Lions, which means we are officially halfway there of our 2025 NFL team by team previews. Yeah, 16 teams to go down and 16 teams to go. So, yeah, stumbling my words all over the place, but yeah, we're essentially at the halfway point, which means we got 16 teams to go. So, let me know your thoughts on whether it's on YouTube or slide into the DMs on my social at Very Cold Lasagna, and let's have a conversation about it. Let's have a conversation on these 4 teams and how you think they'll fare in the upcoming season, whether it's win or losses, or which player is going to overperform, underperform, or do just in the middle this upcoming season for any of these 4 teams that we just talked about in this episode. So that's going to do it for this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. I have been your host, Dylan Lasagna. Thanks for tuning into this episode number 275. And as always, keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your filthy casual takes on the world of sports. And until I see you, when I see you in the next one, and in part 5 of our 2025 NFL team preview month, peace out.